Good morning, all you fair people. It is your host, the MPRRE2, joined by my co host, Daniel Wells, aka BaseCube95. Say hello.
Good morning, or afternoon, or evening, or whatever time of day you're watching this.
And today, me and Daniel are going to be exploring some never before interesting World War II stories.
And we might possibly discuss some other things too, but promoting much, this is mostly about World War II stuff.
That's pretty much it.
Well, so then, let's get this show on the road. Or should I say, get this show on the railroad? I understand, E2. This will just be between you and me to make it a bit of an easy one for you.
Indeed. Uh,
So, what kind of World War II stories did you have in mind?
well, there's on this channel, there's plenty of interesting stories to go around.
Mm-hmm.
Um, let's see here. Hmm. Oh, Nazi warship survived two nuclear bombs. What?
Oh.
Huh. This should be a good start.
You won't get copyrighted for any of this, would you?
Um, probably not. Maybe not.
Okay. Cruiser Prince.
The unkillable cruiser that even atomic bombs couldn't sink was German. The Prinz Eugen was one of a class of heavy cruisers, the Admiral Hipper class, that were created by Nazi Germany when Hitler was still abiding by the terms of the 1935 Anglo-German Naval Agreement. This treaty, designed to limit the size of the resurgent German Navy in comparison with Britain's Royal Navy, allowed Germany to construct 5 10,000-ton heavy cruisers. However, all of the vessels would weigh much more than the agreed figure. Laid down in Kiel in 1936, the Prinz Eugen would have a full displacement tonnage of 18,750, almost twice the agreed limit. 681 feet long, with a beam of 71 feet, she was powered by 3 geared steam turbines, producing
Ooh.
132,000 horsepower, giving her a top speed of 32 knots or 37 miles per hour. Modern and fast, the Prinz Eugen was armed with 8 20.3 centimeter or 8-inch guns in 4 twin turrets, in pairs, fore and aft, and she was heavily protected by anti-aircraft guns as well. She also carried no fewer than 3 Arado AR-196 seaplanes for reconnaissance. Her main armoured belt was between 70 and 80 millimeters thick, or 2.8 to 3.1 inches. Launched in August 1938, she was damaged during RAF raids on Wilhelmshaven in 1940, but eventually commissioned into the Kriegsmarine on the 1st of August that year. She paired with the huge German battleship Bismarck for Operation Rheinübung, which saw the flotilla
Bismarck,
move
I've heard
out
of that one.
the Atlantic to prey on.
Wait, what?
I've heard of the Bismarck.
Yeah, and I also have a model of it that I haven't built yet.
I've seen a classic black and white film on the Bismarck. I heard that I think it was my country that somehow managed to sink Bismarck.
Indeed was. I have read about the mission that sunk the
Yeah,
Bismarck.
yeah. And from what I heard, saw in the film, the captain of the Bismarck, who was working for Germany, the Nazis, I mean, he obviously didn't want to back down because he thought that would be being a coward.
Well, I think that was just the movie's portrayal. Um, in actual events, uh, during a swordfish attack, a swordfish is one of your country's torpedo planes at the time. It's like one of those like biplanes.
Oh yeah.
So during an attack on that, a torpedo managed to hit the rudder of the Bismarck and actually managed to turn it back towards the pursuing British battleships.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think I saw that in the classic film that I saw.
Yeah, so it was obviously not an arrogant captain of the Bismarck that caused its sinking. It was a damaged rudder.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So tell me, E2, from your point of view, do you think if we hadn't had sunk the Bismarck, it was possible that Germany would have won the war?
Well, I would have to say, hmm, I don't think it would have lasted that long either. I mean, I think um I don't know, I'm trying to construct how things would go if the
Hmm.
Bismarck had been stuck in my head.
That's okay. I just didn't want to interrupt your thoughts.
Hmm.
Hmm. Mm, maybe we can figure it out over time.
Yeah. Let's
Anyway,
continue.
yeah,
Let's
let's.
continue on with this video.
All
Allied
right.
merchant ships. The 1941 operation ended in failure for the Kriegsmarine when its flagship Bismarck was wounded by British Swordfish torpedo
Told you.
You were 100% accurate. Oh, yeah,
bombers,
those
then
swordfish
cornered and
biplanes.
blasted to ruins by a group of British battleships and heavy cruisers before being scuttled. Prince Eugen escaped this fate. The vessel made it to Brest in occupied France. She next saw action in the Channel Dash when the Kriegsmarine moved the Prinz Eugen and the battleships Scharnhorst and Gneisenau from Brest, where they had been under heavy RAF air attack up the narrow English Channel to Germany. The 1942 operation was a German triumph, taking the British by surprise, the Prinz Eugen fighting a pack of 5 Royal Navy destroyers on the way. Moved to Tromsø in Norway for repairs, she returned to Kiel in Germany for use as a training ship in the Baltic. In June 1944, she joined a task force, including the heavy cruiser Lutzow, and assisted in the German withdrawal from Finland, then in shelling Soviet forces around Memel. Her final actions were providing naval gunfire support against Red Army divisions in Samland on the Eastern Front and also around Königsberg, Gotenhafen, Danzig, and Hela in early 1945. In April, the German ships were attacked by RAF Lancasters armed with huge tallboy bombs.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of the Lancasters.
The Lutzow being sunk.
Indeed.
Prinz Eugen moved to Copenhagen, Denmark on the 20th of April 1945 and there was surrendered to British forces on the 8th of May.
The German cruiser Prince Eugen fell prize to the British Navy. To the Danish capital, where a guard of honor awaits him, comes Field Marshal Montgomery, victor and liberator.
The Prinz Eugen and the light cruiser Nürnberg were the only major German warships to survive in serviceable condition. The question was what to do with them. The British and the Americans didn't really want the Prinz Eugen, but they were equally keen that the Soviet Union didn't get her either, and the Allies divvied up Germany's surviving warships by lottery among themselves. Incredibly, the US Navy was awarded the Prinz Eugen after pulling the name literally out of a hat. Sent to Bremerhaven on the Baltic, she was commissioned as the USS Prinz Eugen and a mixed German and American prize crew placed aboard her under the command of Captain Arthur H. Graubart.
So wow, I didn't know we actually commissioned a German cruiser as one of our ships. The USS Prince Eugen. Imagine.
So your country bought one of the German ships in a way.
I mean, I guess you can say that.
Well, it goes to show that some of the
Majority of the
Germans have
crew,
respect for our countries.
574 men, were
Indeed.
Kriegsmarine prisoners of war, supervised by 8 US Navy.
And that actually proves as a testament to the Battle of Kasser Iter.
The what?
Battle of Kasser Iter.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. I'll show that video next, if I could find it.
officers,
All right.
85 enlisted men. The Prinz Eugen sailed to Boston, arriving on the 22nd of January 1946, where she was carefully examined for anything of intelligence value.
Hey, Boston was in driving distance of my of my town.
How far away from your town is Boston?
Um, I don't know actually. If I were to make a rough estimate, I think it would have to be. I think about 37 miles. I don't know.
Well, that's not too bad. Anyway, let's continue.
Certain things being removed from the ship, and the guns of turret Anton were also removed. Problems arose when the German prisoner of war crew was released on the 1st of May 1946 and sent back to Germany. Before departing the ship, the German officers and men presented Captain Graubart with a specially engraved Kriegsmarine sword and an honorary High Seas Fleet badge. The US crews found the vessel's propulsion system difficult and complex, and she became unserviceable.
The button is back.
Can't ignore it.
For this reason, it was decided to expend the heavy cruiser as a target, but not just any target. The US decided that the Prinz Eugen would be one of several warships that would be expended in an atomic explosion. Up to this point, there had only been 3 atomic blasts in history. One in New Mexico to test the weapon's viability, and the 2 operational uses of the weapon at Hiroshima and Nagasaki in World War II. No one knew what effect an atomic weapon would have at sea against warships. Operation Crossroads would be held at Bikini Atoll in the former Japanese territory of the Marshall Islands. A fleet of surplus warships was gathered for the tests. Included in the atoll were 4 old US battleships, 2 aircraft carriers, 2 cruisers, 13 destroyers, 8 submarines, and many amphibious and auxiliary vessels of many types. Also present would be 3 former Axis warships. The Japanese battleship Nagato, the only Imperial Japanese Navy battleship to have survived World War II. The Japanese light cruiser Sakawa, and the Prinz Eugen. The aiming point for the first test, codenamed Able, was the US battleship Nevada, painted in high visibility orange. A B-29 Superfortress named Dave's Dream, this aircraft previously having been called Big Stink, and was the camera plane for the Nagasaki attack of the 509th Bomb Group. The unit that had dropped the atomic bombs on Japan in 1945 dropped a Fat Man plutonium implosion-type bomb of 23 kilotons, codenamed Gilda, on the 1st of July 1946. Gilda detonated 520 feet above the ships, but missed the aiming point, the Nevada, by 710 yards.
There it goes. The 4th atomic bomb has been successfully detonated. First you see a blinding flash. Then comes the hemispherically shaped cloud that expands rapidly just behind the initial pressure wave. After the smoke clears, the characteristic mushroom cloud begins to form and shoot skyward. The first phase of the bomb burst produces the effect of an exploding derby hat, where the outside edge of the rim outlines the outermost front of the pressure wave at that instant. The cloudy rounded portion of the hat results from what is known as the cloud chamber effect.
2 attack transports sank immediately, 2 destroyers a few hours later, and the Japanese cruiser Sakawa the next day. Because the bomb missed the aiming point, where the ships were most heavily concentrated, the damage caused was less serious than hoped for. Aside from the 5 that sank, 14 others were seriously damaged, and it was clear that ships that were stern or bow on to the blast had a better chance of surviving than those that took the blast broadside on.
Ooh.
The Japanese battleship Nagato was damaged but remained afloat. As for the Prinz Eugen, she was more 1,200 yards from the blast's epicenter, and her only damage was a bent foremast and a broken mainmast. She suffered no significant structural damage. All the vessels were heavily contaminated with radiation. The second test would be conducted. It was theorized that heavily armored warships could survive a nuclear airburst, so what about an underwater detonation? Test Baker was conducted on the 25th of July, another 23 kiloton Fat Man bomb used, this time suspended beneath a landing craft in the middle of the fleet. The depth of water was 180 feet, and the bomb detonated at 90.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, fire.
Whoa!
Oh, gee, oh my god.
Oh my god. I can only imagine how many of those ships down there were damaged. But I must admit, it can't have done the water a lot of good.
No, we couldn't have.
The explosion was absolutely enormous, and 10 test ships were immediately sunk, including the Nagato and the battleship USS Arkansas.
Oh.
The Japanese battleship Nagato, which flooded.
But the Prince Eugen was hardly damaged, testament to her sturdy construction. The heavy
Blimey.
cruiser had only a small leak, but was otherwise sound. Incredibly, this vessel had survived 2 atomic bomb detonations close up with barely a scratch. She appeared to be unsinkable. With the test completed, the Prince Eugen was towed to Kwajalein Atoll, but although the blast hadn't killed her, the Prince Eugen was undone by radiation contamination. The small leak I mentioned could not be repaired due to the fallout that covered the ship, and she began to list. On the 22nd of December 1946, in a desperate attempt to prevent the ship from capsizing, the US Navy tried to beach her, but before completing this maneuver, the Prinz Eugen capsized and sank in shallow water, her stern visible sticking up above the waves.
Oh my god.
And incredibly, the Prinz Eugen, virtually complete, remains in the same position today. Little has been removed from her. One propeller was retrieved in 1979 and today is on display at the Laboa Naval Memorial in Germany. And one of its ship's bells is at the National Museum of the US Navy in Washington, D.C. Efforts have been underway for years to remove the vessel's fuel oil and seal her tanks to prevent ecological damage, and this has mostly been successful. Due to the oxygen-rich water and sea life, the wreck has deteriorated badly. Raising the Prinz Eugen is not really economically viable or realistic. So ends the story of the unkillable cruiser, Nazi Germany's last World War II warship that even 2 atomic bombs couldn't sink.
Oh. So
Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and share, and also visit my...
So Prince Egan is still there.
Yes, but
Blimey.
upside down.
Well, at least they were able to get a few parts of her, and most likely were able to remove the oil sources from her.
What? I mean, what an embarrassing way to go. Just that small leak, and it can't be repaired because of that radiation.
And they said, before they noticed it, they said at the time she seemed to be unsinkable. Well, that wasn't the case when it came with Titanic.
Imagine just saying those words. She can't be sunk. Those were like the death. Those are like the death words of a ship. She's unsinkable.
Mind you, they said that Prince Egan only had one small leak. Titanic likely had a few splits after hitting that iceberg.
Yeah, no kidding.
Mind you, and another thing, Titanic went down in just over 2 hours. I bet Egan didn't go down that fast.
No, they haven't.
So, well, it just goes to show that sometimes we can purchase ships from other countries.
Yeah, but in all reality, it really ain't that cheap.
No, nothing's cheap these days.
Right, I have found something that's both World War II and railway related.
Oh, what's that?
Just watch. These are the last World War II German trains still in service.
Oh, wow. I've seen German engines before, but not like these ones.
Incredible though it may seem, in 2022, 5 World War II built German war locomotives, the famous Kriegsloks, are still in everyday service.
Still in everyday service, huh?
Indeed.
Then I guess
Now
steam
the
is still popular in most
trains
countries.
will be used, aside from a few working museum examples. Well known among the train enthusiast community, but hardly known more generally, the Kriegslocks are some of the last steam locomotives in commercial operation today. And where do these historical trains operate? Not in Germany, but in one of the nations conquered by Hitler, Bosnia-Herzegovina in the former Yugoslavia. The venerable wartime trains call coal wagons near the town of Tuzla, and incredibly, though designed to last about 10 years when built by the Germans in World War II, these old girls are still going strong almost 8 decades after entering service.
So these engines were designed to pull coal trains, were they?
Well, during the war, they were made to pull like long distance trains. Long distance trains of like war equipment, ranging from artillery, tanks, um, um, pretty much pretty much other supplies meant for like armies
So
during that time.
what you're trying to say is that they took German munitions or something?
Yeah, munition trains as well.
Okay, that sounds reasonable. All right, carry on.
The Kriegslok, short for war locomotive, emerged out of increased wartime demand for trains. More properly, the Deutsche Reichsbahn Class 52. They were simplified compared with pre-war locomotives and were constructed by several companies, including AEG, who used forced labor from the concentration camps at Auschwitz and Stutthof. More were built in Posen, Vienna, Berlin, Munich, Strasbourg, and several other points in the German Empire to supply the massive wartime requirement for locomotives. Even the top Nazi leaders' armored trains, including Hitler's train, codenamed America, were hauled by pairs of Kriegsloks. Around 7,000 were constructed. With 10 drive wheels, the Kriegslok had enough grip to haul 2,000 tons across a level surface at 31 miles per hour or 50 kilometers an hour. The locomotive was also well designed for cold weather work, particularly useful in Germany's eastern campaigns. Entering service in 1942, the Kriegsloks had a maximum speed of 50 miles per hour or 80 kilometers an hour and were used to haul supplies and raw materials, pull troop trains, and trains moving heavy military equipment like armored vehicles and artillery. Many Kriegsloks were inherited by nations that had formerly been under German occupation. Yugoslavia was one such place, occupied by the Germans in 1941 following a short invasion. And when the Germans left at the end of the war, dozens of Kriegsloks were used in the various parts of the nation until the breakup of Yugoslavia in the early 1990s. Now only Bosnia still uses the Kriegslok commercially.
How is that engine
Long
How is
after
it moving with its drive
by
wheels
diesel
stuck?
locomotives,
I have
in
no,
one
I
corner
have
of
no idea. I think
Bosnia,
it's like a
a
braking
handful of
method. I
Kriegsloks
have
work
no.
daily, hauling coal from
Oh.
mines in the Tuzla region. At Bucchini, there is a depot devoted to the overhaul and maintenance of these wartime German trains. Normally, one Kriegslok is undergoing an overhaul at any one time. One is receiving light maintenance, and one is kept as a spare, and two are hauling coal from the mines. There are also a handful of non-operational Kriegsloks used as a spares pool to keep the 5 locomotives operational. The 2 locomotives working the mines, which involves short shunting trips rather than long journeys, supply
Sorry about my
coal
dog, she's
to
barking.
Tuzla
That's okay.
Thermoelectric Plant, Bosnia's biggest power station. These are regularly swapped out for those who have just come out of maintenance. Somehow, with limited spare parts and little money, Bosnians have managed to keep the 5 locomotives operational for over 7 decades without major incident, a testament both to their skill and also the build quality of vehicles designed to last a maximum of a decade. essentially war emergency throwaway locomotives. Three of the
I think
Bosnian
I think this
Kriegslok
is sort of a
were built
funny
in
thing here.
1943 and the other two in 19...
Wait, I'm sorry?
There's something interesting here. These big engines are tender engines, right?
Yes.
And what was that Gordon always used to say?
Tender engines don't shunt.
Well, this proves him wrong.
1944. Each locomotive hauling 2,000 tons of coal per shunt, come rain, shine, or snow. The question naturally is, for how much longer will these World War II trains remain in service? Probably quite a few years yet, as though plans have been mooted to replace the Kriegsloks with more modern diesels. Lack of cash means that this plan may not come to pass anytime soon. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and share. Also visit my audiobook channel, War Stories with Mark Felton.
That's very impressive. I'm I'm actually surprised that Germany still uses their steam engines today.
Well, those locomotives, they're not really under German ownership, but rather under the ownership of the countries that they once conquered.
Oh, I see. But yeah, I'm surprised that those countries still use them.
Yeah, and that proves as a testament that steam still has its worth, even after 8 decades.
Of course, steam still has a worth. I mean, I may have seen it on heritage railways, but it does have its uses on special trains on the main line here in the UK as well.
Now, I want to show you a story that really that baffled me when I first heard it.
Really? What's it about?
So, there was this tank engine that got attacked by a German fighter, and you're gonna be amazed by what you hear next.
Um, okay, if you say so.
That German plane that attacked that tank engine was shot down when the tank engine exploded.
What? What?
Hang on a second. Tank engine that shot down a German fighter. Freaking advertisements.
A plane shot down from a tank engine that exploded?
Yes, and get this, it's a Brighton tank engine.
Uh,
An
an
LBS,
E2?
an LBS, no, not an E2, but a D3.
A D3? I've I've heard of the D3s, but I can't quite picture what they look like.
On the 27th of November 1942, a German pilot was tasked with doing a sweep over the southeast coast of Britain. He climbed into his Focke-Wulf 190 and flew over to England, accompanied by another plane, with his main target being Ashford Railway Works, along with any other railway targets worth cannon shelling. The pilot was Heinz Beerwerth, a well-versed pilot with a few confirmed kills. After arriving over Hythe, he dropped several bombs, likely into the Romney Hythe and Dymchurch railway station, and ended up killing a man after one of the shells exploded in his front room. After that, he fired many shells over Smeeth, damaging many points and signals essential in the shunting yard. He then attacked Ashford Railway Works, hitting 2 locomotives and killing one of the firemen. He also attacked a farm as he flew over King's North, striking a farmer in the leg. While not the most deadly attack, it was still pretty horrific for those caught up in the conflict. Don't worry though, he got his comeuppance in a very unexpected way. Charles Gilbert was an engine driver going about his work
Oh,
driving
those engines.
lid. The engine was an 044 tank engine numbered 2365, a former London, Brighton and South Coast D3 locomotive, and it was travelling down the line at a steady 25 miles an hour. It was a rather average day for Charles and his firemen, but neither could predict what would happen next. Beerworth spotted the train, banked his plane and flew towards it, firing multiple shells into the engine. The damage caused steam to burst into the cab, which badly scalded the fireman, and the pressure in the boiler caused it to explode with enough force to rip off a large portion, funnel and all. At that moment, Beerworth's plane was directly above the engine as it burst, launching a blast of steam and jagged metal into the plane, causing it to come down in a nearby field. Beerworth was thrown from his plane as it crashed and was found dead, having drowned in the nearby dike he landed in. He was later buried with full military honours. The fireman was taken to hospital after suffering severe steam scalds, and Charlie Gilbert, the driver, was uninjured, albeit lightly shocked by the whole ordeal. The locomotive, ironically, had come from Ashford Yard, the same yard Beerworth had attacked mere moments ago. It was repaired and eventually put back into service, working until 1953 when it was finally retired and scrapped. What happened to the driver and fireman, I don't know, but it's likely that both continued to work the railways until their retirements. Let there be a lesson to take from this. Never underestimate the power of a steam locomotive, or subsequently, the power of irony.
That's amazing. It was attacking an engine and it just blew up on its face.
Yeah, and that's both pretty satisfying and quite baffling at the same time.
But why would they scrap it if it did something during the war?
Well, BR is unfair. BR was unfair.
Well, I suppose so. It's just an engine like that deserves to be remembered for what it did. But
Hey, at least it was paid a tribute in that video.
I'm surprised they were even able to repair that engine after it went off bang.
It was only I think it was only the boiler that just blew up. Nothing else, not the whole engine.
And I'm just glad that its driver and fireman survived.
Yeah, I didn't even know how they survived that whole thing.
Do you think they knew it was probably going to blow up, and they just jumped out of the cab before it did?
I don't think they had an. Even if they would jump out of the cab, I don't think they would have enough time.
I was going to say the engine was probably still too close at the time.
That just goes to show, never overlook a little engine.
I never thought about that.
That brings a whole new meaning to that.
What's
That brings a whole new meaning to never overlook it.
Because you never know what they could do to you.
Like that 190 was literally overlooking it.
Well, yeah, definitely.
When it was like when it was literally like strafing the crap out of it,
Exactly.
and it literally blew up in its face.
It just shows that sometimes your targets can take you down yourself.
Right now, I'm going to introduce you to the Castle Eater story.
The what?
The Battle of Castle Eater.
Okay.
The U.S. Army and German Wehrmacht versus Waffen-SS.
Ooh.
Oh, yeah, it's right.
The battle for Castle Itter, May 5th, 1945. The U.S. Army and German Wehrmacht versus the German SS, Austrian Alps. On May 5th, 1945, a few days after Hitler's suicide, American soldiers under command of U.S. Army Captain John C. Jack Lee Jr. teamed up with a number of Wehrmacht soldiers under German Major Josef Sepp Gungel, who was opposed to the Nazis and had been collaborating with the Austrian resistance. Joining them were French prisoners of war and a Waffen-SS officer who had defected. Gungel had surrendered with a white flag from his vehicle to Captain John C. Jack Lee, who was close by, presenting the mission to rescue prisoners from Itter Castle. An attempt for assistance in a rescue by the castle's Czech cook had reached Austrian resistance in a nearby town, and as a result, reached Major Josef Gangel, who was now their leader. The first attempt to find help was by Yugoslav political prisoner Zvonimir Kukovic, but it had failed. While he had reached Major John Kramer's and the American 103rd Infantry Division, their heavily armored rescue attempt, which would use M10 tank destroyers, was recalled by heavy shelling and by superiors for encroaching into the territory of the U.S. 36th Division. The objective was to rescue VIPs from an Austrian castle called Schloss Itta in the Tyrol, now converted to a high-profile prison that held French VIPs, including the ex-prime ministers Paul Renaud and Edouard Daladier, a tennis star, and former military figures. The German guards at the castle had fled, and the prisoners had broken into the weapons room and armed themselves with pistols, rifles, and submachine guns. However, a German Waffen SS division was roaming around the nearby forest and had arrived to recapture the castle and execute the prisoners. The American and German group closed in on the castle, and Lee and Gongol greeted the unimpressed French prisoners who were expecting a bigger rescue force. Lee ordered the Sherman tank to park at the front gate so it could cover the road. Once the men had been fed, Lee, Gongol, and the young SS officer set up defensive positions and talked over strategies to defend the castle from the impending SS force. In the evening, a reconnaissance force of Waffen SS opened fire on the castle to test the enemy's strength. The US and Wehrmacht troops moved to their defensive positions and returned fire. At dawn, the SS used an 88 anti-tank gun, which was well concealed, to destroy part of the castle. And then the Sherman tank, which had been providing machine gun fire. However, the radio man inside was able to escape in time. The Waffen SS, numbering around 150 men, had began their main attack from the tree line towards the castle gate, and from the west, reaching the castle's lower walls. The American and German defenders, as well as the French prisoners, fired at the attackers from their high-up positions in the castle and loopholes. The SS managed to kill and wound several of the defenders, including Joseph Gangel, who was killed by a sniper while trying to move French Prime Minister Renaud from harm. By the afternoon, Lee and the American and German defenders were running low on ammunition and were seeking reinforcements from Major John Kramer's, who had telephoned him with the assistance of Austrian partisans. A relief force was now on its way. As the situation was getting desperate, Lee accepted tennis star Jean Barotra's courageous offer to vault the castle wall and run past the SS strongpoints and ambushes to find and guide the reinforcements to the castle. Lee prepared for an SS breach of the walls and a close quarters fight until finally, at 4 p.m., the American reinforcements arrived with tanks, quickly defeating the Waffen SS force and taking many prisoners. It is believed that this was the only battle where Americans and Germans fought together as allies.
Blimey. That was interesting.
And that serves as a testament to our relationship with Germany today.
I can imagine so. I already knew about the fact that Hitler had killed himself by near the end of World War II. From my theory, I think he committed suicide because he eventually realized that he wasn't going to be victorious.
Yeah, the game was up, and the Soviets, hungry for revenge. Yeah.
But yeah, my grandmother always did say that some Germans didn't like the fact that they were in the middle of a war and wanted it to end.
Indeed, and and even some of them tried to assassinate Hitler in order to try to make the war end.
But you can imagine how that went, don't you?
Yeah, and there was one notorious assassination attempt. I think it was like the July bomb plot.
Oh, I guess that didn't go so well.
No, it didn't, because the planning room that Hitler was in, it had it was not in a concealed room. There was windows, and so the blast was not contained. And most of the force had escaped through the windows.
I see what you mean. But yeah, World War II is technically like, well, Germany attacking.
It's technically World War One, but a lot more graphic and more destructive.
Well, yeah, but I was actually going to say Germany attacking England back then is a lot like Russia attacking Ukraine today.
That's right.
But from what a friend of mine once said, I know he says that since Russia is attacking Ukraine, right?
Yes.
The friend that told me said he knows Putin might be mad and want to take over Ukraine, but he says he doesn't think he'll go as far as World War III.
We let's hope it. The only we gonna all we can do is hope that things don't escalate to that level.
Yeah, we don't want that.
And I've read somewhere that Germany was sending some weapons of theirs to the Ukrainian defenders.
Oh?
Yeah, thus furthering their case that
Well,
they're more than happy to help.
hmm. Well, as long as it's not exactly them getting into the war, that's okay.
That's indeed.
Because my country is currently making donations to help the innocent people of Ukraine with, with food and water and place to take shelter.
Right.
Technically they're like Ukrainian refugees.
That's true. Yeah. All of those exoduses.
Exactly. I mean, I have respect for Russia. It's only the renegades of Russia that I have against, who the ones who are attacking Ukraine.
The aggressive Russians.
Mm-hmm. Or, I know this sounds rude, but some people refer to them as communists.
Now that you say that,
Hmm?
I do want to reveal something about Putin.
Oh yeah? What's that?
He was a former KGB agent.
Oh really?
Yeah.
But if he was, why did they choose to make him the Russian president?
That I do not know.
Well, either way, I hope he calls off this attack on Ukraine soon.
I doubt it will come anytime soon. It would likely be the economic pressure and all the sanctions imposed on him.
Because I have a feeling that some Russians are probably going to do what some Germans tried to do to Hitler. Try to assassinate him, but I don't know how true that is.
I've also read that somewhere there's the possibility of a coup d'etat going on. That might happen.
What's a coup d'etat?
Hang on, let me look it up for a second.
Because
I know I know what it means, but I just
it's just the word coup d'etat sounds new to me.
it's French.
Oh,
A sudden, violent, and illegal seizure of power from a government.
oh,
An example in a sentence: he was overthrown in an army coup.
oh! I see.
Often
Well,
shortened to coup in English, is the seizure and removal of a government and its powers. Typically, it's an illegal seizure of power by a political faction, rebel group, military, or a dictator.
oh, I see. Well, from what Wolf tells me, Putin is attacking Ukraine because he wants it to be a part of Germany. I mean, he wants it to be a part of Russia again.
Jesus.
I'm sorry, I got muddled up with words there.
That's freaking funny.
But yeah, I think Putin wants it to be a part of Russia again.
Yeah,
The USSR.
yeah, trying to rebuild the Soviet Union, all that crap.
But at the moment, even though he is attacking Ukraine, I don't think he's making much success.
It's all backfiring in his face with all these bad arse Ukrainians
Exactly.
fighting back with all they have.
Yeah, I mean, Russia may be bigger than Ukraine, the country, I mean, but with the fact that Ukraine is trying to fight back, it's a hopeful sign that Ukraine is going to win this war.
Indeed, and there's been a huge number of abandoned Russian military vehicles, and all these Ukrainian farmers, they're just taking them one by one.
Do you know what I could say to Putin if I wanted to?
And what would that be?
I would say, Mr. Putin, just give it up. You're bloody losing.
Like, just give up, damn it.
Well, I don't think he is going to.
Given that the man he is.
But I just wish he would just come to his senses and understand that he's attacking an innocent country.
Mm-hmm.
But either way, let's just hope it'll all stop eventually.
Yeah. Hopefully.
Anyway,
And hopefully NATO troops and hopefully no, not NATO troops. And hopefully NATO will solve this whole humanitarian crisis.
Yeah, I agree. But anyway, what other history stuff for World War II have you got this time?
We shall be looking into the famous Tiger 131.
Hitler's secret tank?
Catch a tiger.
The British had first encountered the Tiger tank in North Africa in January 1943. They wanted to get their hands on an intact example so that they could develop British countermeasures to deal with this formidable foe. But the German crews were under orders not to abandon a working Tiger tank under any circumstances. They
They
had
what?
to destroy it themselves to prevent.
They were given orders to not abandon it in any working condition in no matter what circumstances. Either
Does that mean they can't leave it even if it got shot at?
yeah, destroy it in order in order to not let it fall into your country's hands.
Oh god. This Hitler
Prevent
is
its
almost
capture.
like he didn't care for his
The world's
soldiers.
most famous Tiger tank, number 131, currently displayed at the Tank Museum, Bovington, England, was captured
Ooh.
in a fierce engagement in Tunisia in late April 1943. For a long time, the exact location and the unit responsible for the Tiger's capture had been debated, but the Tank Museum has settled the debate after exhaustive research. Tiger 131 was captured on a feature called Point 174, immobilized by British Churchill tanks, as part of the efforts to crush the remaining units of the Afrika Korps in Tunisia. On the 24th of April 1943, the 2nd Battalion, the Sherwood Foresters, made an infantry assault on Point 174. They were supported by 2 squadrons of Churchills from the 142nd Royal Armoured Corps. The day before, Point 174 had been unsuccessfully assaulted by the North Staffordshire Regiment, but the Foresters captured the feature. Arriving at the top, the infantry observed 6 Tiger tanks 300 yards down the slope opposite. The Tigers harassed the British infantry with machine gun fire and high explosive shells. The armour supporting the Sherwood Foresters was late to arrive, but the Churchills immediately engaged the Tigers once they reached the crest. Several Churchills were picked off in confused fighting. During this
Blimey.
battle, someone managed to get some rounds into Tiger 131, which was from Heavy Panzer Battalion 504. The position of the abandoned Tiger and how and where it was hit meant that the critical shots had to have come from Point 174, but trying to establish which British unit had the victory has been difficult. It is believed that Tiger 131 was hit 3 times by 6-pounder shells from Churchills of the 48th Royal Tank Regiment. The first shot hit the gun barrel and ricocheted into the turret ring, jamming its traverse, wounding the driver and front gunner and destroying the radio. The second shot hit the turret lifting lug, disabling the gun's elevation device. The third hit the loader's hatch, deflecting fragments into the turret. The crew bailed out, failing to first destroy the tank as ordered. The Sherwood Foresters held Point 174 for several days, enabling the British to recover the drivable Tiger tank. The British took parts from other knocked-out Tigers and restored 131 to full working order. It was proudly displayed in Tunis and inspected by both Prime Minister Winston Churchill and King George VI before being sent to England.
Oh yeah,
After
King
being
George
publicly
VI.
displayed as a war trophy to raise civilian morale, Tiger 131 was extensively evaluated by the British Army. Interestingly, the Tank Museum has another German tank in its collection that was captured in the same battle as Tiger 131. It is a Panzer III.
Wow.
It was armed with a
Panzer
short
III?
barrel 75mm gun and was
And it was in the same battle too.
What do you know of the Panzer III?
Well, for one thing,
Hmm.
it is another Panzer variant,
Yeah.
but it wasn't really that powerful in later war days, in my opinion. The one most commonly shown, the one I most commonly like, is the Panzer IV with that 75mm cannon.
Oh yeah. All right.
It is really satisfying to look at tanks that have long barrels and muzzles. It just makes them look tough.
I think that's what tanks were meant to be in those days. All right.
Indeed.
All right,
employed
carry
to
on.
support infantry. This particular tank belonged to Heavy Panzer Battalion 501. Jerry cans carried atop the turret were only permitted when the vehicle was traveling and not in combat. Tiger 131 was transferred to the Tank Museum in 1951. In 1990, she was partially restored when the museum's Tiger II Maybach engine was transferred to 131, the Tiger tank's original engine having been sectioned for display. Then, in 2003, 131 emerged from further restoration as the only running Tiger tank in the world. She was repainted in her original North African color scheme. In 2014, she appeared in the Brad Pitt war movie Fury. She remains one
Oh,
of the Tank Museum's main attractions today.
that is very interesting. And she appeared in the film Fury.
Indeed, you seen Fury?
No, I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it. What is Fury about? Is it a war film?
Yeah. I'll try to. I've seen it before. I'll try to give a rough representation of it, a rough
Okay,
summary of it.
okay, I'm listening.
Um, I'm trying to remember. Okay, okay. It was so in Nazi Germany in early April 1945, the Allies meet a fanatical Waffen SS resistance. Don
Okay.
Bordaddy Collier, a battle-hardened U.S. Army Staff Sergeant in the 2nd Armored Division. It commands a Sherman tank named Fury and its veteran crew,
Mm-hmm.
all of whom have fought together since the North African campaign. As Fury moves deeper into... Wait, no, I'm getting muddled up.
Um, it's okay. Maybe I can research the film Fury later.
But it basically shows tank combat in Germany 1945.
Hmm. And I guess it shows a bit of that Tiger 3 in action.
Tiger 131, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, in the guise of an SS Tiger.
Hmm. There is one part of war history that I'm interested in, and that's that naval ship that's now a floating museum in London, HMS Belfast.
Ah,
If you can look up for a video about that, one that's not too long like the others.
HMS Belfast.
Mm-hmm. I've
I
actually been on that ship.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I went to see it when I went for a weekend in London with my mum. We went inside the ship, which is now a floating museum, and it showed us how their sailors lived during the war on that ship. They had what did they have? They even had a whole room, a big kitchen, and they had a cat on board to catch the rats if there were any on board.
Interesting.
And they even
Okay.
had a dentist.
Okay,
But
I think I found an interesting video about Belfast. HMS
okay,
Belfast and D-Day.
all right.
Okay, here we go. Found the video.
Okie dokie.
Oh, Thomas R. Studio has asked, "Do you know about the Model 11 Oka?" Yes, I do,
Model 11 Oka. I can't say I have heard of that.
but I do.
All right, maybe after this video we might be able to look that up.
Okay,
All right, when you're
and
ready.
I might tell you a bit about it.
Okie dokie.
Juno Beach was one of the 5 assault beaches of D-Day. On the 6th of June 1944, HMS Belfast supported the British and Canadian assaults on Gold and Juno beaches.
At 1:20 a.m. on the 6th of June 1944, the ships of Bombardment Group E made their way through a minefield and then took their positions about 2 to 3 miles offshore here under the flagship command of HMS Belfast. HMS Belfast, HMS Diadem, and 11 other destroyers which formed the bombardment group then from 5:27 a.m. began firing in support of the landings on this beach being made by the 3rd Canadian Infantry Division. Just before the bombardment started, Vice Admiral Hugh Dalrymple, in command of Bombardment Force E, sent the signal from HMS Belfast to all of the ships under his command using a cricketing metaphor. Best of luck to you all. Keep a good length, keep your eye on the middle stump, and soon we'll have the enemy all out.
Almost 7,000 vessels participated in Operation Neptune, the naval component of D-Day.
In the early hours of the 6th of June, as it began to get light, I've never seen a sight like it in all my life. There were literally thousands and thousands and thousands of ships of every size, every description, all around us.
Here I am at the German gun battery at La Marfontaine, which was the first target of HMS Belfast guns on D-Day when they opened fire at 5:27 a.m. The La Marfontaine battery position had no direct line of sight to the sea, so they were reliant on a forward command post which would telephone back to the guns to allow them to fire on positions on the beaches and out at sea. The bombardment cut the phone line relatively early on in the day, and the guns played no further role in D-Day.
HMS Belfast is sometimes misreported to have fired the first shots of D-Day. In fact, another ship stole her thunder by about a minute. Lieutenant Peter Brooke Smith, who was serving on board HMS Belfast, recorded in his diary that another cruiser to the west fired first at 05:23. The entry in HMS Belfast log records that she opened fire 3 minutes later at 05:27, with a full broadside to port. As one of the larger ships present at D-Day, HMS Belfast had a fully equipped sick bay staffed by surgeons. This meant she also played a medical role on the 6th of June 1944, taking on board casualties from 1 p.m. on D-Day.
My captain, Captain Parham, he was in charge of the battleship HMS Belfast, which was awesome responsibility. He sent me down to the sick bay on D-Day itself because he knew that an army corps had been badly blown up and they were trying to save this man's life.
For the next 5 weeks after the 6th of June, HMS Belfast sat offshore and fired almost continuously in support of the landings and the Canadian and the British armies push inland. Supporting the D-Day landings was the last time HMS Belfast fired her guns in anger in the Second World War. At the beginning of July, she returned to Plymouth for a well-earned refit.
Well earned indeed.
I never thought that Belfast had fired her guns in anger.
But all for a good cause in support of the D-Day invasion.
Yeah, indeed. They often demonstrate on her what it would have been like when she fired her guns. What I mean is they do that on board Belfast, who is now the floating museum she is now.
Demonstration shots.
And inside the bit where they fired the guns, and showing a projection on the wall of her action during the wartime.
Okay, so Thomas R. Studios explains a little bit. The Oka, it was known as the human bomb, aka the cherry blossom.
Oh, that sounds interesting.
Oka... Plane.
Model 11 Oka.
I have got an image.
An image? Okay.
Hang on a second.
Let's see what this image... Oh, it's a plane.
Yes. A jet-powered suicide missile.
Pardon me for saying, I've never seen an aircraft like that before.
So, yeah. In the final days of the Pacific War against the Japanese, the Japanese, under the code of Bushido, they resorted to kamikaze tactics, which means kamikaze tactics, which is basically like doing suicide dives into American ships. Yeah, they were under the belief that they would be mistreated if they got captured by the Americans. So they literally fought to the death and
So
even
these were like sort of suicide bombing planes?
yes, and even traditional Japanese planes were used as suicide bombs.
God, I didn't think the Japanese would go that far.
Well, they were pretty crazy back then.
Hmm. And this isn't the Pacific War anymore.
Indeed. And this is a warhead in that was in the nose of a captured Oka.
So it's like a bomb hidden inside the chassis of a plane?
Yeah, so when you hit the when it's like when the plane hits an American ship, boom, it goes.
Oh,
And I remember seeing in a documentary that it managed to sink an American destroyer,
maybe
the USS Saint Lo, I think it was named.
maybe we should have a look at that. The Saint Lo.
Oka Oka plane.
And you say that shot down one of America's ships?
It destroyed one of the American ships. Yes,
Oh,
I think this is a. Hang on, I gotta. CJ, this just got dark real fast. Oh yeah, we're talking about interesting World War II stories, CJ.
yeah. Oh, Thomas R. Studios just pointed out the pilot didn't have a parachute, so he would be in the cockpit and pilot it until crashing, taking the pilot with it.
Yeah, literally dying for his emperor.
I still find that a bit dark, committing suicide just to sink an entire ship.
That just shows how desperate the Japanese were to stop the American invasion of Japan.
Ah,
In the
all
Second
right.
World War, the situation in the Pacific had become rather desperate for the Imperial Japanese
Oh
Army.
my god!
By 1944,
Yeah,
Let me
this is
just
one of the most
one of the what?
iconic.
Uh, sorry, your mic's breaking up a little bit.
Pieces
Uh, your mic's having a funny moment.
of com-
Uh, I'll wait a minute while you sort your mic out. It's having a. It keeps blacking out. Do-do-do.
plane.
I can't. I think your mic's having a funny moment again. I'll give him a minute.
Doctor.
Give him a minute, guys. E2's mic's having a funny moment. He shouldn't take too long. Ah, yeah, he's having connection issues.
Right, I'm back.
That's better. And hopefully it won't happen again.
Really, CJ? Really?
No, CJ. I think that guy who just crashed is pretty much dead.
I think he was talking. I think he was talking about me.
Oh. No, CJ. E2's definitely not underwater.
And yeah, it was dishonorable for for Japanese military men to surrender back then.
I guess he does have a point there. Anyway.
All right. Anyway, let's return to the
Carry
video.
on.
had become rather desperate for the Imperial Japanese Army. By 1944, the Japanese military and government were in agreement that the war could not be won, so certain measures needed to be taken to stop an Allied victory at the expense of the Japanese Empire. The Empire had already started using kamikaze aircraft or suicide attacks. Using Japanese aircraft, these attacks had gained an extremely notorious reputation. Because of how desperate the situation was, different methods of kamikaze warfare were being developed by the Japanese High Command. The design of a manned flying rocket was accepted. The design was sent to the Yokosuka Research Facility at the University of Tokyo, and prototypes were developed. From this, the Yokosuka MXY-7 Oka, or Cherry Blossom, was devised. The MXY-7 failed its first 10 trials, and the Mark 11 was the only variant to enter service. The flying bomb was to be launched from a Mitsubishi G4M bomber, and the suicidal pilot would take their journey with the bomber crew. The Oka pilot would then take their place within a small vehicle in the bomb bay and was locked into place from the outside. Once released, the suicide bomber would pilot his craft towards a target whilst being propelled by rocket power and gravity to ensure top speed. The end result would of course lead to the death of the pilot, and it was hoped that this kind of attack would psychologically affect the American soldiers. The
That's
bomb on board was
that's a
carried
bomb.
A
2,600
very big one by the looks of it.
intent on causing extreme damage and
They'd have to be
destruction.
very careful not to
Over 850 of
mess
these
around with
suicide
it.
bombing aircraft were created, and to some extent they were effective. The final approach from the Oka was effective due to the fact it was difficult for a defender to stop the aircraft, mostly because of the fact it gained a high speed of around 400 miles per hour at level flight and 620 miles per hour during a dive. The first two attempts to transport the Oka to a position where it could be dropped using aircraft carriers ended in disaster due to both the Japanese carriers being sunk by US submarines. On the 1st of April 1945, 6 G4M bombers attacked a US fleet off Okinawa. It is reported that one Oka was thought to have hit a battleship, the West Virginia, causing moderate damage. However, following the war, it was stated that no hits were recorded and that a near miss occurred. The transporter ships the Alpine, Achenar, and Tyrrell were also hit by kamikaze aircraft. However, it is unclear if these were hit by Okas. Because of this, the US military began to extend their defensive rings of their ships to try to intercept Oka aircraft sooner, before the suicide mission could be launched. On the 12th of April 1945, the US fleet was attacked again by 9 G4M aircraft. The destroyer, Manat Al Abaili, was hit and sank. The Jeffers, the destroyer, destroyed an Oka with AA fire, but the resulting explosion was still so powerful enough that the Jeffers had to withdraw. The destroyer Stanley was then attacked by two Okas. One struck the vessel above the waterline behind the ship's bow, with its charge passing straight through the hull and detonating later underwater, causing a little damage. The other Oka narrowly missed, possibly because its pilot was killed by AA fire and crashed into the sea. The following attacks in April, using Okas, were ineffective. In May 1945, more Oka attacks happened. On the 4th of May 1945, one Oka hit the minesweeper Shay, causing extensive damage to the ship and also some casualties. A week later, the destroyer Hugh W. Hadley had been hit and suffered extensive damage and also flooding, with the vessel damaged beyond repair. These incredible and unbelievable missions of suicide bombing aircraft were later judged after the war to be ineffective, as the US judged the damage caused to be negligible. However, the story of the kamikaze is infamous throughout the Second World War. The Oka really does reinforce the lengths that some members of the Japanese Air Force would go to protect their empire. The Americans nicknamed the aircraft Banker, which translates from Japanese as fool. It's fair to say that the Americans didn't share the same ideas with regards to suicide and dying for your country being the ultimate honour as the Japanese did. Thank you for watching the episode past. To support the channel, please subscribe.
Oh. God.
Yeah. Some questionable weapons were developed during that war.
You can say that again. Some of them were successful, but some of them were not. But isn't that kind of unfair for the pilots who got themselves killed committing suicide? I mean, what would their families think of the fact that they got themselves killed? I mean, I know it would have been dishonorable to back down, but I just think it would have been unfair for their families.
Well, as the old saying goes, war kills young men.
And sometimes some of those men are not given a choice.
Drafted.
Hmm.
Thomas R. Studio asked, have you heard about the Ramree Island massacre?
Ramree Island massacre?
I can't say we have.
No, I can't say I have. But I don't even. That must have been something that happened during the war.
I think if I remember correctly, I think it happened during the Pacific War.
The Pacific War.
Yeah.
Hmm, that is interesting. Hmm.
Oh, apparent.
What?
I right. I've just seen that there was a Berlin raid before the Blitz.
You mean a Berlin raid before the Blitz of World War II?
Yeah.
And who committed that raid? My country?
No.
Who?
It was actually the French.
The French attacked Berlin?
Yeah, the first Berlin raid of forgotten Allied mission.
But if that was the case, why would they let Germany do the same to us?
I'm not I'm not sure actually.
But anyway, let's have a look.
Call of War, World War II, one world right over the first script. When we think of the Allied aerial campaign against Germany, perhaps we see a couple of images in our minds. US B-17s struggling through flak and fighters on daring daylight raids, and the grim determination of RAF Bomber Command's Lancasters surging east through darkness and then lit by the flames of burning German cities thousands of feet below. But one Allied nation has been airbrushed from the aerial campaign against Germany, and it is the nation that struck the first blow against Hitler's capital, a distant and difficult target to attack, but a target of enormous symbolism and propaganda value. That nation was France, and it was an attack that was suppressed by the Nazi authorities, deeply embarrassed that an Allied aircraft had managed to reach and bomb the Reich capital, particularly as Luftwaffe Chief Hermann Göring had proclaimed, "If any bombs fall on the Reich, I will change my name to Meyer," meaning that because Meyer is a common German surname, Göring would become a nobody. It was an expression that Göring would soon regret uttering. France was invaded by Germany, along with the Low Countries, on the 10th of May 1940. Though huge and capable, the French army did not understand the new German warfare of blitzkrieg, and along with the British Expeditionary Force, it suffered defeat after defeat, sapping military and civilian morale as the German advance continued. The British began evacuating its forces out of Dunkirk in late May 1940, along with tens of thousands of French troops, while the rest of the French army fought on. On the 3rd of June, in the midst of the Dunkirk operation, German aircraft bombed Paris. It was seen as an affront to the French people.
Hang on a second, be right back.
Okay, I'll wait. Cool. So yeah, folks, war can be a terrible thing.
All right, I'm back. It was a quick question that I was asked.
Oh, okay.
The government demanded revenge. The German raid had encompassed 300 aircraft, but they had only flown a short distance to bomb Paris. The French had few aircraft still available, fewer still able to fly the great distance to Berlin and back. The only suitable types were former transports taken over by the French Navy. The Farman F-223, a large aircraft that had first flown in 1938. A rather ugly aircraft, its amazing range was what made it so appealing, able to fly 5,000 miles on just over 3,000 gallons of fuel. With a 10-ton payload capacity, it could also be easily modified for bombing. 3 aircraft were modified, each fitted with racks. but the type was very vulnerable to German fighters, having only one 8mm machine gun in a dorsal turret for protection. Following the Paris air raid, the government asked Captain Henri Dellière, commanding a squadron of 3 bomber converted F-223s at Bordeaux in France, to launch a raid on Berlin. It sounded like a suicide mission, but Dellière planned carefully. One aircraft was selected for the mission, a plane named appropriately Jules Verne, after the famous author of adventure stories. Dellière would captain the plane himself. The target selected was the Siemens factory in Berlin, a huge area of both factories and also housing for workers. The plane would head north along the Atlantic coast, go up the English Channel, following the coast at low level to avoid German radars and hopefully German fighters, and then turn east to fly over southern Denmark, also under German occupation. Then it would turn south to attack Berlin before making a long exit across Germany and France to land in Paris. Such a mammoth mission was only possible because of the Farman's massive range.
Good grief, that is a long way to
Dellière
go.
and Jules Verne took off from Bordeaux at 3:30 on the afternoon of the 7th of June 1940. They followed the route I've described, making the turn into German territory. Berlin appeared as a glow on the horizon. The Germans so confident that the Allies couldn't bomb the capital that no blackout was in operation. At midnight, the French bomber arrived over the city's eastern suburbs, Dellière fooling German air defenses by pretending to be coming in to land at Tempelhof Airport, then revved up and moved on to Tegel. A few minutes later, they were over Siemensstadt and dumped all the bombs, followed by a dozen incendiary bombs physically thrown out of the passenger door by 2 crewmen. Banking away, German searchlights and flak came alive, but Dellière was able to confuse the gunners by following a low-level irregular course before heading southwest towards France. No German aircraft were able to find him in the darkness, as night fighters at this time were very primitive. The big bomber touched down at Paris-Orly Airport at 1:30 p.m. on the 8th of June to a triumphant welcome. Dellière had dumped a total of 8 250-kilo and 80 10-kilo bombs on Berlin that night. Little physical damage had been done, but the German authorities were left red-faced by the daring French raid. They decided to cover up the affair, claiming that the searchlights and gunfire over Berlin that night had been an exercise. 2 nights later, Dellière and Jules Verne bombed the Heinkel aircraft factory in Rostock, and 2 days after that, bombed Venice in Italy, also dropping propaganda leaflets on Rome. France surrendered on the 22nd of June 1940. The 3 F-223s were flown to the unoccupied zone. However, the French resistance burned Jules Verne on the 8th of November 1942, as the Germans moved to occupy Vichy France. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and share, and also visit my audiobook channel, War Stories with Mark Felton. You can also help to support both of my channels at PayPal and Patreon.
Goodness.
Vive la France.
I never thought France actually did such a thing during the beginning of the war.
The French were quite bad horses.
Unlike what we have today, that is.
Yeah, ain't that the truth?
I guess it shows that even like us, the French also hated the Nazis.
Yes, indeed.
Another war story that sort of interests me is the one that's called the Dam Busters.
The Dam Buster raid, you say?
Yeah, there's actually a classic film that's based on the true story of that time, and in the film, the Dam Busters, the classic one of the actors in there is the same voice actor who voiced Pongo from 101 Dalmatians.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Let me explain what I can tell you. Dam Busters is based on a true story where a couple of Lancaster planes from England are sent to throw barrel bombs into German dams, destroying them to flood bits of Germany.
to flood the industrial zones.
Yeah, you could say that.
Go on.
And it was the barrel like bombs were like an invention sort of thing. Hang on, let me try and find out what the name of those bombs were. Okay, let's see. Dam Busters bomb. Ah, here they are. They were called. That's a funny name. They were called bouncing bombs.
Bouncing. I mean, I guess you could say that. I guess they just bounce along in the water then.
Yeah. Hang on. If you give me a moment, I can share my screen and show it to you.
All right.
Share screen. Okay. All right. Screen share
Is
now.
up.
This is the bomb that was used to destroy the dams.
Interesting.
And they were dropped by these planes called Lancasters. This is a picture taken from when they were testing them on the sea. Technically, they would just fly at a distance from the sea, drop the bombs into the water. They would bounce like a bouncy ball, like you know when you throw a flat stone on the water.
Like skipping stones.
That's it, yeah. It did that all the way to, and here's a rough demonstration. It would just drop it like that, spinning, and it goes like that straight into the dam. Of course, sometimes it would keep spinning as it goes underwater, and it would drop down here. Then, boom!
Hit it from the inside.
Yep. There was, but the only thing is though, it wasn't a very easy target because it had to. It also took a couple of bouncing bombs to destroy the dam.
I mean, they were quite tough dams.
Hang on, there might be some pictures from it. I don't know. Dams in Germany. So here's a result of what those bombs did.
They blew a big hole in it.
Yep, allowing the water to flood most of the parts of Germany.
Look at the lake. Look at the lake behind it. It's almost drained.
Well, actually, I think it's a river.
I meant river. I meant sorry.
Oh yeah, it's okay. Hang on. So yeah, they did it like that. They were just flying from back here, drop the bombs here, and then once there was more than enough. Well, technically, it exploded before, but it took more than a few bangs. But when they had enough to one more, which was enough to destroy the dam, boom!
And all that excess just poured out into the industrial districts.
Yeah, you could say that. So you could say that this idea was part of a reason what helped us win the war.
Yeah, hitting Germany's industrial capacity.
Hang on, let me find the Lancaster bomber. And these were the planes that dropped them.
Not to brag, but I do know my planes.
I know. I've actually seen one of these in real life.
Interesting.
They were at an air show by a beach in Bournemouth. Oh, hang on, I pressed the wrong button.
Yeah, you need to click on stop sharing. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's my information on the Dam Buster bombs.
That is quite interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just trying to. Oh, interesting. The Rocket Sherman.
The Rocket Sherman? I've never heard of that.
American T-34.
Ooh, sounds interesting.
The Americans mounted a rocket launching system on top of a Sherman.
Ooh.
The Germans had successfully deployed one of the first battlefield rocket systems, the Nebelwerfer, from 1940 onwards. The name meant smoke mortar, and the system was originally developed in secret in the 1930s. The Nebelwerfer would be towed into position, each weapon having 6 barrels, firing the 30-centimeter explosive missile. with about a 5-kilometer range, a fin-stabilized, electrically fired rocket. The problem for the Nebelwerfer units was the great amount of smoke produced during firing, marking the battery's position to the enemy.
Whoa. Those are powerful guns.
Requiring rapid displacement of the battery to
Rocket
avoid
launchers, more
enemy
like.
artillery or airstrikes.
Hmm.
The Nebelwerfer, in its many forms, was effective in dumping large numbers of artillery-sized shells onto a target quickly, and the noise the rockets made when fired was very intimidating to Allied troops. The question for the Germans was how to keep the Nebelwerfer batteries intact and the crews alive. The Germans solved this problem by developing the Panzerwerfer series of vehicles, basically armored half-tracks mounting a 10-barreled Nebelwerfer. It first saw action on the Eastern Front in autumn 1943 and proved to be very effective.
I showed this vehicle to you and Wolf before.
This vehicle?
Yeah, the Panzerwerfer. It was in it was in one of my War Thunder streams.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, the firing caught you guys by surprise.
Hmm. But those rockets are coming out looking like shooting stars.
Soon the Allies would begin thinking about using the rocket in a similar manner, but with increased mobility and crew protection. One of the problems the United States Army faced in its war in Europe was to increase the firepower of assaulting US troops, particularly against the static defensive emplacements and bunkers the Germans increasingly used. Some sort of saturation weapon was necessary to cover a target area with artillery-sized shells in just a few seconds, but to also be much more mobile than any artillery battery could ever be. The answer was to combine the rocket and the tank. The Americans developed the T-34, a modified M4 Sherman tank mounting a special launcher over the turret. The launcher had 60 plastic tubes, firing 4.5-inch or 114mm M8 rockets. The T-34 was known as the Calliope. It had 36 tubes on the top and 2 groups of 12 below. Intriguingly, the entire rocket rack was connected to the Sherman turret's 75mm gun and could be pointed where the gun was directed. The fin-stabilized rockets had a maximum range of 4,200 yards, or 4 kilometers. Firing was triggered by cables running into the tank's turret through the commander's hatch. The crews nicknamed the vehicle the steam organ, as its pipes resembled those on the old Mississippi River steamboats. The one
Oh, I hear
problem with the
Pepper.
Calliope was the tank's main gun could not be
He's wanting
fired
his food early again.
attached to the turret,
Not
hampering
again.
the M4's ability to defend.
That's usual of him though. But don't worry, I'm gonna make him wait,
And the entire assemblage
Good.
could be easily ejected from the vehicle,
whether he likes it or not.
operations. The question is, was the T-34 any good in action? The design was supposed to have been used for busting German shore bunkers initially, limited numbers having been manufactured in 1943 with a view to deploying them in the invasion of France in June 1944. But they were not used due to the vehicle's high center of gravity, dangerous for sea transportation. Later, during the drive into Germany, 30 M4s had the rocket apparatus installed, the plan being to use the Calliopes to assist an infantry division's advance against German static defenses on the Siegfried Line. But the German Ardennes offensive of December 1944 put paid to the plan, and the tanks lost their rockets and were used in the conventional role. However, in the final stages of the war,
the Second Amendment covers both arms and armor.
Oh God!
While it's not always
Bad
convenient,
bets.
I'm with you.
Is the thing frozen again? Hello? Uh, oh, sorry about that, folks. He's having a few problems with the internet again. Just give him a moment. Hopefully, it'll kick back in. So yeah, give him a moment. He'll get back there. Hmm? Oh God! Blooming dog of mine. If you right, connection problems again.
Yes, unfortunately.
Uh,
Internet's been like that.
hmm.
I'm not sure why.
Well, let's try and finish this video.
In the final stages of the war, 5 US armored divisions gained Calliope-equipped tank battalions, seeing some service in the final battles across Germany. But one of the problems faced by Calliope crews in combat in Germany was the vehicle's very obvious profile. They were prized targets for German anti-tank assets intended to be kept at the back of any advance. As with most of the other rocket-equipped World War II vehicles, Allied and Axis, the Calliope's effect was mostly psychological. The weird, unfamiliar screeching produced by the rockets when fired and the wide impact area frightened German troops out of all proportion to its actual military effect on the battlefield. Later development led to the T-72, using fin-stabilized rockets. The T-72 had 60 shorter tubes loaded from the front, and the main gun could be fired when the rocket assembly was still attached to the tank. A further development was the T-40, later called the M17, commonly known as the whiz-bang. This ferocious beast launched 7.2-inch or 183mm demolition rockets, but had only 20 tubes.
This is what it looks like. The demolition rocket launcher, designated by the Ordnance Department as the T-40, mounted on an M4 medium tank.
This type saw very limited action in France and Italy. The whiz-bang was supposed to have been used in the Pacific to help overcome Japanese beach defenses in the Mariana Islands, as these tests in Florida demonstrated, but they did not see service. The British had their own rocket arm Sherman variant, going by the name Tulip. The Canadians had originated the idea by mounting 2 pairs of Royal Canadian Air Force 60-pound RP-3 aircraft rockets to the turrets of their Staghound armored cars. Unsurprisingly, accuracy was poor and the system was never used in action. However, a British Coldstream Guards officer decided to try to imitate the same idea by placing the aerial rockets onto a Sherman tank. As a shock and awe weapon, the Tulip worked well. Having a couple of aerial rockets, normally fired from Typhoons, lobbed at them from tanks certainly ruined many a German's day. For the advance into the Netherlands, one Coldstream Guards troop used the Tulips to destroy an emplaced 88mm gun and also caused the surrender of between 30 and 40 very shaken German infantrymen. One German officer actually complained that using aerial rockets launched from tanks was against the Geneva Convention, or as he should have said, that's just not cricket. Many thanks for watching. Please subscribe and
That's
share.
just not
Thanks for listening.
cricket.
I've heard that saying that's just not cricket before, but that's a good one. But yeah, those rockets coming out of that rocket launcher, they come out like they're looking like shooting stars.
The most famous rocket launcher vehicle was of course the Katusha launcher,
Ah, I can imagine so.
nicknamed Stalin's organ.
Why was it nicknamed Stalin's organ?
I think it was because of the sound, the iconic sound it made when the rockets were firing. I don't know. I have no idea why it was named that way. It just was.
I see. All right. Well, I'll have to go in a minute, but what do you say we watch one more interesting World War II story before I head off, eh?
Okay. Let me find one last good one.
That sounds good.
The Messerschmitt.
The Messerschmitt?
The Frankenstein fighter.
Ooh, sounds interesting. Ooh.
This episode is brought to you exclusively by Felton.
No one cares.
Programming 5B EN830, built at Castle Bromwich, made its first flight on the 30th of April 1942. In May, it was taken on the strength of number 37 Maintenance Unit at RAF Burtonwood in preparation for frontline service, and in June 1942 joined number 131 Squadron based in Wales at RAF Llanbedr. The Royal Air Force was operating a new type of mission in northwest France from South Coast bases, and number 131 Squadron had relocated to RAF West Hampnet to take part in rhubarb operations on the continent. What this involved was sections of fighters crossing the English Channel at low altitude, and then streaking across the French countryside, hitting targets of opportunity. Any German vehicles or military buildings were fair game to be strafed by the Mark 5Bs, two 20mm Hispano cannons, and four 303-inch machine guns. It was dangerous, as the pilots were exposed to German flak and ground fire from all sorts of weapons, not to mention patrolling German fighters pouncing down from higher altitudes. And there was also the problems of terrain, tall buildings, especially church towers and the like. Flying EN830 on one such rhubarb sortie on the 18th of November 1942 was Pilot Officer Bernard Scheidhauer, a Free French airman, accompanied by his compatriot Pilot Officer Henri de Bourdard, both of number 131 Squadron RAF. The pair of Spitfires blasted across the English Channel, crossing into France at Saint-Aubin-sur-Mer near Caen, then flew to Carentan, scene of heavy fighting between US and German troops less than 18 months later during the Normandy campaign, coming under fire as they shot up targets of opportunity. Scheidhauer's aircraft was hit by flak, and his wingman, de Bourdard, managed to fly back to England, while Scheidhauer struggled to nurse his aircraft back to the Channel coast. In a confused state, Scheidhauer mistook Jersey in the Channel Islands, the only bit of Britain occupied by the Germans, for the Isle of Wight off England's south coast, and made an emergency landing in a turnip field near the village of Trinity. Scheidhauer was less than pleased when locals arrived and informed him of where he actually was. Working fast, he tried to destroy the intact Spitfire, but due to battle damage, his fuel had all leaked away, and he couldn't burn the plane. Instead, he smashed as many of the instruments in the cockpit as he could before a truckload of German soldiers turned up. Scheidhauer was taken prisoner, and the Germans were very happy. They had just received an intact Spitfire. Following some field repairs by Luftwaffe mechanics in Jersey, the German pilot flew EN830 to Germany. The aircraft still in RAF camouflage scheme, but with Luftwaffe crosses covering over the RAF roundels on the fuselage and wings, and black swastikas on the tail.
That's disgraceful.
Moved in stages, escort
Very
to
disgraceful.
Germany, where the Luftwaffe evaluated captured enemy aircraft, the plane's color scheme was dramatically altered. Its nose, underside, and tail painted yellow, and the fuselage and wing tops dark green. The RAF code EN830 was also deleted, and the aircraft received the Luftwaffe designation CJZY. But the biggest changes were the removal of the Spitfire's guns and cannons and the loss of its Rolls-Royce Merlin 45 engine, replaced with a Daimler-Benz DB605A, the engine fitted to the Messerschmitt Bf 109, the Germans' equivalent fighter, changing the entire front end of the Spitfire, creating the world's one and only Messerschmitt. The plane was then moved to Echterdingen, where the Me 109's propeller and carburetor scoop were fitted. So why had the Germans created such an abomination? To test how the Spitfire performed powered by a 109's engine in comparison to the regular Messerschmitt 109. For 2 years, the Messerschmitt remained at the Daimler-Benz test facility being evaluated. What the Germans discovered was that the Messerschmitt retained the Spitfire's superb handling characteristics, both on the ground and in the air, but now with increased engine power and with higher speed. Amazingly, this Frankenstein creation was actually superior to both the Spitfire and the 109. The Messerschmitt was able to attain a higher ceiling than the Spitfire or 109, measured at 12,700 meters, or about 41,500 feet. That was 1,000 meters, or 3,280 feet higher than the 109, and 1,475 meters, or about 5,000 feet better than the Spitfire Mark V. The aircraft's climb rate was also better than both of the regular aircraft. It does beg the question that if the Germans had managed to build Spitfires equipped with Daimler-Benz engines, would they have had the best fighter of World War II at that time? Thankfully for all concerned, the Germans did not have the blueprints to the Supermarine Spitfire, only a few captured examples and a few wrecks. These tests continued until the 14th of August 1944, the aircraft flying often against 109s. It was very popular among pilots who queued up to take the Messerschmitt airborne, often flying it off-duty as well. However, the Americans spoiled the fun for the Germans by bombing Echterdingen, wrecking the Messerschmitt. This unique experimental aircraft ended up on the scrap heap. Interestingly enough, post-war, the Spanish company Hispano license-built Messerschmitt 109s, known as the Bucon, and they were fitted with British Merlin engines, appearing in the 1969 film The Battle of Britain, and are of course regularly seen at air shows today. The question is, did the Germans ever try this during the war? I'd be interested to know. The final part of the story is unfortunately a sad one. Pilot officer Scheidhauer ended up in Stalag Luft 3 POW camp in Poland and took part in the famous Great Escape. Unfortunately, he was one of 50 Allied pilots murdered by the Gestapo following the escape. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and share. Also visit my audiobook channel, War Stories with Mark Felton. You can also help to support both of my channels at PayPal and Patreon, details in the description box below.
That was actually very interesting.
Yes, and it is quite a nice ending to this stream. But so on that bombshell, to those of you who are watching, thank you guys so much for watching, and I thank you, Daniel, my co-host, for joining me on this learning experience.
It's my pleasure, Mr. NPRE2. So before we go though, it's likely that you E2 will probably have one-to-one streams from time to time somehow.
Yes, yeah.
Not just me, but with the others as well.
Yeah, this one-to-one stream has certainly been enjoyable.
Well, I'm just saying you might do this with other streamers, from like the others in our crew from time to time.
Yeah, probably. But yeah, we certainly have learned a lot today, haven't we?
Yep, we certainly have. And also, before I go, E2, I think you might already know this, but I finally got Olivia's lines for the next Bambi and Lassie episode.
Yeah, I heard that from Olivia in Hangouts.
So I'm gonna start working on it when I have the time.
Excellent.
And as always, I'll also be listening out for when you need my lines for your next Furry Railway Tales episode.
Right, solid copy.
Okie dokie. So, folks, thank you for watching our stream, and we hope to see you in the future.
Bye-bye!